Hello, everyone. Welcome to Or This. This is my Monday morning quarterbacking of the scriptures and sermon for the previous Sunday. And this video is from Sunday, March 3rd, which was the third Sunday in the season of Lent. The scriptures assigned for the day were Exodus 20, verses 1 through 17, Psalm 19, 1 Corinthians 1, chapter 18 through 25, and John chapter 2, verses 13 through 22. So I preached on the gospel, which is usually my tradition. But the first reading was actually the Ten Commandments that are found in Exodus. Ten Commandments can be found in two places. One place is in Exodus, the other's in Deuteronomy. But this was in the midst of the story of God's people being led by Moses through the wilderness out of slavery to the promised land. And God gives God's people these commandments. And the first thing I want to say is that, it's interesting. And I don't really understand the relationship between the Ten Commandments as we know them and the rest of the law, the Jewish law. The Ten Commandments are kind of what we've pulled out and have made our 10, these are the commandments, the most important commandments, kind of. We've pulled those out, and these are the ones that we memorize ourselves, or we try to encourage others to memorize. So the basic premise of these laws is that it's important as God's people to be in right relationship with God and with one another. So the first couple of commandments have to do with the way in which we do and don't relate to God. We only have one God. We don't disrespect God by using God's name in vain. We honor the fact that we as human beings need rest because our Creator rested from creation. And then the other commandments have to do with relating to those around us. Honoring parents, not allowed to take life. Don't interfere with another couple's relationship. So all of the pretty much second half of the commandments have to do with maintaining right relationship with humanity, with other people. Now, it's important for us to know that there is more to God's commands than the Ten Commandments. There are other laws that God's people were given to live by. And some of these had to do with their worship life and parameters for gathering for festivals and sacrifices and that kind of thing. Some of them were rituals for purity rituals, washing of hands and taking ritual baths and that kind of stuff. But then there were also more commands, more laws about how to live in relationship with one another. And some of those had to do with how to take care of people who were in particularly vulnerable positions in life. Examples of that would include the widow, the orphan, so a woman who didn't have a man to take care of her, an orphan who didn't have parents to take care of them, those who were sick, those who struggled with disease, those who had physical limitations, the stranger, they sometimes are called the alien, but it's the foreigner, the person who doesn't necessarily belong to your group, but somehow comes across your path from elsewhere. All of these kinds of people who would be vulnerable in their community based on their particular situation. There are laws within the Jewish law for caring for and relating to these people, and those laws were basically to care for these people. Sorry, that's the phone, but I don't have to get it as far as I know. So that's important for us to remember, especially when Jesus comes into the picture and is teaching. So the gospel for this day, which I preached on, was Jesus driving out the money changers and those who were selling animals and stuff like that at the temple. And what I talked about was the fact that they had this nice, smooth operation for the worship life of the people coming for celebrating Passover. They know exactly how to make sure that everybody had the sacrifices that they needed, who had access to buying these animals that would be needed for sacrifice for the festival. But these people, these religious leaders who set up that kind of a system, did not put as much time and effort into the other very important aspect of the life of faith, which was to care for the widows and the orphans, to care for the poor, to care for those who are suffering. In fact, they almost focused on one thing in exclusion of the other. Now, that has been an issue for God's people. That happens all the time in the Hebrew Scriptures, Old Testament as well. The prophets talk about this all the time. But the idea that worshiping God goes hand in hand with caring for your neighbor, it's not in place of, but these two things have to go together. And this gives us this realization that, and this comes up in Scripture in a number of different other places, can you really be in right relationship with God when you're not? Can we really be in right relationship with God when we are not in right relationship with the humanity created in God's image? Can we really have to be devoted to loving God if we're not devoted to loving those that God created in God's image? So Jesus comes to teach us, to help us understand that. And this is a lesson that we have to learn over and over again. The importance of caring for our neighbor in need. The importance of the ministry of the church to be with and care for the least in society. Not to get wrapped up in society's ways of just going with the flow of doing what feels good and what makes us most successful and what gets us ahead and what gives us the most security. But the way of Jesus, which was the way of God from the beginning, is caring for the people who are made in God's image, and in doing so, loving God. So the 10 Commandments are not the only commandments. They are just the ones that we tend to focus on and memorize. But there is a whole set of commands, what we call ethical commands in the law, in the Jewish law, that had to do with how to take care of the people who are considered least in society, because they matter to God just as much as anybody else. So thank you for watching. Feel free to share your comments either here, either on YouTube or on Facebook. And have a blessed week.